Okay, let's continue with analyzing returns in the mergers. So let's look at the returns to bidders. These are the dollar gain or losses throughout time from 1980 to 2001. As you can see, till the end of 1990s, you see there is almost no value created for bidders after a merger. Then we see really bad losses after the merger for the bidders. So it is very questionable, let's say, whether a merger is a good investment for the acquired firm or not. We know that for target firm, it's always good. For the acquired company, we don't know it. So let's look at one more example here. These are the percentage and dollar returns for the merged company, both target and the acquirer, and also the acquirer, the buyer. So this is from 1980 to 2001 for 20 years. This is for 1982 to 1990. Here, 1991 to 2001. And this is 1998 to 2001. It's the crisis time. So interesting. There are a couple of interesting things here. One is here. So when you look at the percentage return to the merged company, so the market reaction, it's always positive, right? This is both acquire and the target company's point of view. It seems like investors always think mergers are good. If you look at the dollar gain or loss, what do we have? We have a loss of $80 billion when we look at the dollar value of the transaction. Even if shareholders think that it seems like a good deal, and this is how the stock market reacts, we see a dollar loss after the merger. And why do you think that this happens? It's not a fair question, so I will just tell you the answer. So when we calculate percentage returns, we calculate the unweighted percentage returns. So we are giving actually equal weight to all the merger transactions. And overall, it seems like on average, mergers are creating value when you look at the price reaction. But actually, the deals that have negative value are the large deals, large mergers. So big companies' mergers are generally destroying value, or at least this is what the shareholders think. So that's one interesting thing. Like large firms' mergers are destroying value. So small firms are making better mergers. Why do you think it might happen? It might be the case.
Maybe there are two reasons. One is maybe huge acquisition cost between companies because they are large companies, and maybe second reason is
that's definitely a wonderful point. Of course, large merger. May I just summarize? Okay, he is right. He basically says the cost of a large deal is really, really high. Yes?
The second reason is maybe greed of the CEO. Being an empire builder, they make somehow profitable acquisitions to be just for their greed.
Perfect.
So it creates a loss.
You know, your answers are biggest birthday gifts to me. Thank you. Yes?
Is there a volume effect? The smaller firm is smaller than large firm, so it affects much more than the large one.
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
Only ratios.
Definitely. When you have weighted averages, of course, large companies will have more weights. So the outcomes for large mergers affect the outcomes a lot. Alican is definitely right. So we're going to talk about agency problems with mergers. One is definitely the empire building behavior. And large firm CEOs can be, let's say, more greedy in the sense that they already have lots of money. So if you have the CEO of a small company, you don't have much money. And when you look at projects, you're trying to find good projects. Big companies, they have tons of money, so they can also afford making bad investments. So in general, the evidence we see is large mergers generally destroy value. Or large companies' mergers are not very good compared to small companies' mergers. One little thing I want you to look is actually the most of the loss value in the merger market comes in the crisis year. So for those 3 years from 1998 to 2001, look at the loss. It's minus 134. When you look at the longer period, 1991 to 2001, it is minus 90. So which means most of the value destruction comes from the crisis years mergers. Actually, if you take out those 3 years of in the 1990s, actually the rest of it is profitable. So you have positive value. Okay, the same thing can be said to acquiring firms part as well. Overall, you see that the reaction to the acquired companies are positive, but since big acquirers are making, or let's say spending more money on the mergers, or maybe making worse mergers, we see a dollar loss in the right-hand side of the table. Okay, so we talk about those. The last thing I'm going to show is the premiums, merger premiums. So these are merger premiums from 1973 to 1998. As you can see, in general, the premium paid, if you remember what is premium, it is basically the acquisition price on top of the pre-merger price. It is generally 40%. So we know that we already talked about why target companies need premiums, otherwise they wouldn't agree with the merger. Also, in a tender offer, they gain more actually. Remember, tender offer was when the CEO of the acquired company goes directly to the stockholders of the target company. In those mergers, shareholders gain more because they have they are working for their own interest. When there's a manager in between, the CEO of the target company might be accepting a lower premium for his own interests. Let me just ask you, how can it happen? So when I said in a normal merger, I'm approaching Ahmet, for instance, to buy his company. And when do you think he would accept a lower premium? Or is it okay for him to accept a lower premium from the point of view of his firm's stockholders? Which one is better for you, high premium or low premium? High premium. When do you think he's going to accept a low premium?
Bribed.
Sorry? When? Bribed. Bribed is kind of a correct term, actually. This is not an illegal bribing, but it's a legal bribing. There was a study, I don't remember who wrote it, but he showed that if, in the cases where the CEO takes a seat in the merged company after the merger, the premium he asks from the acquired company is lower. So if Ahmet says, okay, lower premium is okay, but give me a seat in the new company, he is okay with taking a smaller premium. So there's the interest conflict, of course, between shareholders and the CEO. Okay. Another thing is, of course, good managers. Good managers might say no to a merger if they think that they can have a higher price. In that case, that's a good thing. And another thing is, in the merger announcement, they're sometimes not replying immediately because some other company might be interested in your company as well. So it might be almost like a price war between companies to buy your company. So in that case, sometimes the target CEOs wait until new offers come. Okay. Then let's look at why companies do acquisitions, actually. The biggest reason we always hear is large synergy. You know the word synergy? Okay, that's very important. And for that synergy that the merger will create, they say it is okay to pay premiums. So the acquired CEOs say this is a very good investment. The merged company's value will be so high, everything will be great. So that's why we are paying all this premium. But in real life, we saw that the acquisitions don't create that much value. Even the announcement returns around 1% or even negative. In some studies, they show negative returns for acquirers. So in general, it doesn't happen. And why it doesn't happen, why they cannot create synergies is because they cannot handle the merger very well. So they might be losing intellectual properties. They might be overestimating the synergy effects. It's not very easy to correctly price all the possible outcome, of course. There are lots of uncertainties about it. Okay, the good thing about, sorry about the mess up, for some reason PowerPoint is not working, so we're using OpenOffice and things look weird here. But basically it says you create value when you make a good merger, which means when you have good economies of scale, when you enhance revenue, when you reduce costs. These are all good reasons for a merger. Okay, for the synergy, what we have is basically we have the value of the merged company, and if you deduct the value of those two individual companies, the difference will be the synergy. So the additional value you create by combining those two companies. And from here, you see, okay. So this is what we are trying to create, basically. Okay. So this is cash flow. So if you remember, this is how you value cash flows. Cash flows over 1 plus r to the power t is what you should have. And for the synergy, this is what you're looking at. You're looking, I showed you this before. It's basically revenue minus cost minus taxes and capital requirements. It gives you the new cash flows. So you are just looking at the new companies, merged companies' cash flows and how much synergy it's going to create. Okay. There are two types of synergy creation. One is cost reduction, and the other one is revenue enhancement. The first case I have is with SBC and AT&T. SBC wanted to acquire AT&T, and they were talking about how much value this transaction would have, and it had a cost reduction synergy. So what we have here is, so you can read all the articles if you're interested. But basically what happens here is SBC wanted to buy AT&T for $16 billion, which is pretty good. If I remember correctly, the cost reduction, they're talking about how much synergy it's going to create, how everything will be awesome. But actually they laid off 13,000 workers, for instance. So they're basically reducing costs and getting rid of inefficient sources, basically. So this is one way to create synergy. The other one is revenue enhancement. Revenue enhancement is awesome, of course. Your combined firms' revenue is higher than two individual firms' revenue. And Delta and Northwest was a good example of it. I think this was 2005 or 2006 they announced the merger. And they have different routes, actually. So together, they were spreading over a bigger market, let's say, and together they were able to increase revenue. So that's another way of creating synergies. Okay, another thing we can do is economies of scale. You already know this term. So basically, if you can create a bigger company, then you can produce a larger volume at a lower cost. And we saw that in Stride Ride and Saucony. One of them was children athletic shoes company, and the other one is generally sneaker company. So basically, by taking another small company, they were increasing their economies of scale. They were reducing their costs, producing more. And also, I think Saucony had very good market in China. So Stride Ride was able to use that network in China as well. So that's another good thing about a merger. Economies of scope, it's basically you're combining different marketing techniques for different companies. Like soft drinks and snack foods are sold together. It just creates economies of scope. And then there's also tax benefits part, but I'm going to go into detail later, so I'm just skipping it for now. Okay, vertical integration is another reason to acquire. We talk about it. Basically, there are two companies in different stages of production. like an oil company also buying a gas station or using gas station, and this is generally what they do because it is more efficient, or Apple making operating system and hardware together. But for instance, Microsoft's success, you know, like Microsoft didn't, it made operating system, but not computers, which was actually one of the reasons why it became very successful. So not the same thing doesn't have to work for every company. But vertical integration works for oil companies, or it works for Apple. Good for them. The problem is when you only, you might be very inefficient when you bought all of your suppliers. Economies of vertical integration. So basically, when a company has lots of suppliers, we have something like this before the integration. But if this company buys all of those suppliers, then we're going to turn into that, which might be efficient because you're not dealing with all of those suppliers. You own all of them, which is good. But the problem is you're kind of doing the opposite of diversification. So you have to be on top of everything all the time, which is very difficult for all of us, of course. Okay, so expertise is very important. It's another reason for acquisitions. And we talked about Cisco systems before. So basically, in some industries, it's even more important. But instead of buying human capital, you're buying the entire firm, for instance. There's this example of AXA and Sanford Bernstein. AXA is a French company, and they wanted to go into US market, asset management. And instead of trying to find all the good managers, they just bought another successful asset management company. So it's another reason why companies do acquisitions. And same with Cisco systems and startups. Startups has lots of very smart people, lots of ideas, lots of patents, but they don't have enough resource to make them real. So another company goes buy this expertise instead of trying to find all the patents and everything. So it's another reason why companies might be doing acquisitions. Another thing might be combining complementary resources. So here, firm A and firm B might be good at different things. As I just gave an example, a small firm might have a good patent, but not enough sources to use that patent in real world. So a bigger company buys that company. So they buy the patent actually, indirectly, and they can be more efficient together. That's another reason why companies do mergers. Monopoly gains part is a little bit iffy actually. So whenever there's a merger, of course, there should be very good antitrust laws in the countries. Why? Because a merger might be working against customers and against the market overall. One of the interesting examples is with GE and Honeywell. GE has some aircraft leasing division, and Honeywell has avionics product lines. So what happens is they wanted to merge, and the US laws agreed with it. They said, okay, there's nothing wrong with it. And these are both US companies. But European Commission said no. And it turned into a huge political thing. Like George Bush talked about it. Like it turned into a really, really big fiasco, let's say. So even if these are not European companies, since their sales in Europe was going to turn into some monopolistic thing, European Commission said no to the merger. One thing about this monopoly gain, it's very costly for companies to do that. And actually, they look at how the other competitors in the industry react to a merger. Overall, we don't see competition reacting very favorably to any kind of merger in the industry. Which means, even if this is what a company is trying to do, it is costly for that firm. He has to do the acquisition, and all the other companies in the industry is going to benefit from monopoly gains, which is not the case in general. So we don't see it that much, but it might be a reason for a merger. Okay, then we have efficiency gains. It is another justification of merger. This happens when a manager says, I can buy that other company, it's a good company, but the manager is really bad. So I can be more efficient managing that company. And one example is, did you read Barbarians at the Gates? No? Okay. So it talks about Nabisco and Ross Johnson case. I will probably assign you like a one-page thing to read for next week, so we will talk about leveraged buyouts, and it was a leveraged buyout. So basically, it was all about one CEO thinking that he's awesome and he's going to be very efficient and he's going to manage the new company very well. So this can be another reason why companies do mergers. Okay, another thing I have is tax savings from operating losses. So basically, a company... okay, so basically what happens is a company, two different companies might be paying a lot of taxes to the government. And when you combine those companies, this combined company might be reducing its tax requirements to the government. So it might be another reason why companies merge for tax savings together. Of course, if it is very obvious, SEC might say no to the process as well. So it might be one of the reasons, but it should be masked really well if it is the only reason of the merger. Okay, let's look at this example so we can do some math. Consider we have two firms, Yin Corporation and Yang Corporation. Both corporations will either make 50 million or lose 20 million every year with equal probability. The only difference is that the firm's profits are perfectly negatively correlated. So if a company is making profit, the other one is losing money. Assume that the corporate tax rate is 34%. What are the overall after-tax profits if the two firms are combined into one corporation? What are the expected after-tax profits in both firms if they are separate entities? So read the question one more time so we can look at how tax savings might be a reason for an acquisition. Okay, so we have Yin and Yang. So basically in one stage, Yin makes 50, in the other one it loses 20, and then Yang has the opposite thing. Okay, so what happens here is for both of those corporations, when are they going to pay tax? Are they going to pay tax when they have a loss? No, they will only pay tax when they're making profits. So it's going to pay tax 34% when there's a gain. So we are going to have 33 million as the after-tax profits. But we're gonna have 33 million only with 50% probability. So I'm gonna pay 33 million. My after-tax profits will be 33 million with 50% probability, or I'm gonna lose 20 million with 50% probability. So your expected after-tax profit will be 6.5 million. Right? Is that part clear? Okay, so here I had to calculate my after-tax profits. In the other one, I directly lose money, so I didn't make any calculations because when you lose money, you're not paying taxes. So your expected after-tax profit is 6.5 million for both Yin and Yang, basically. It's the same. So when you have separately, the total value of those two companies is 13 million, 6.5 times 2. When you have the merged corporation, in both cases, you're going to make how much money in the merged company? Thank you, exactly. So you're going to have 30 and 30, right? 50 minus 20 in both cases. And since it's a profit, you have to pay tax. So after-tax profit will be equal to 19.8 million. So this is going to be the case for with 50% probability, but the same thing will happen with 50% probability. So your expected after-tax profit for the merged company is 19.8. So This came from basically tax benefits. With the merged firm, you were able to pay less tax to the government. So the NPV of the merged firm is higher than the total of two separate companies. So this might be a reason for mergers for the companies. Any questions? Okay. This is the same example, so you can work, similar example, you can work on it at home. Another reason why companies might be doing mergers is because it's coming from tax savings. And this comes from two things. One is unused debt capacity. Do you remember why that was so good? Thank you, tax shield. So basically, if a company has less debt than optimal, it is a very inviting target. So as an acquirer firm, I buy that company. So I can enjoy the tax benefits. I can increase my debt capacity. Another thing is increase debt capacity. It is slightly different than the first one. So by buying another company, hopefully I'm doing diversification. I'm becoming a bigger company. In that case, I'm more trustworthy, let's say. There's less risk because of the diversification. So I can find that easily. So this will also turn into a greater tax shield. So this might be one of the reasons why companies are doing acquisitions, tax savings. The last thing about tax savings is the surplus funds. So when a company has lots of cash, we talk about those. They can pay dividends or repurchase stocks. But we know that when there's dividend payment, shareholders has to pay tax on the dividend payments. And share repurchase is not allowed by SEC if the only purpose is tax benefits. In that case, what am I going to do with extra money? I'm going to buy another company. I'm going to use that cash to buy another company. So that might be another reason of tax saving, because by paying dividend, my shareholders has to pay taxes on it. In the acquisition case, shareholders only pay tax when they get cash or when they sell the stock after the stock exchange. That's it. Okay. Let's look at the two sides of acquisitions. One is diversification, the other one is earnings growth. Diversification, do you remember what diversification is? Huh? What was it? You're reducing risk. Diversification is a good thing. So I want to do diversification for my shareholders by buying companies in different industries or in different markets. So I'm doing the diversification. Does it make sense to you? If I'm the CEO and you're the shareholders of my company, would you buy that diversification story? Okay. Wouldn't you just say, why are you doing diversification for me? I can do it myself, calling my brokerage firm. It's easier. Why are you spending all that money? Okay, so diversification is another reason those CEOs always use, but be careful. I mean, what it means. You can do diversification yourself as investors easily by one phone call. Okay, we don't have to go through the merger process. But it's not a made-up reason either, because really diversification is important, and with diversification we can get rid of one kind of risk. What kind of risk we can reduce with diversification? Unsustainable. Very good. How do you remember those? What happened to you guys today? You're answering everything. Okay. Yes, if you remember, with diversification you can get rid of the unique risk, you can get rid of the unsystematic risk, but even the most diversified company will have some systematic risk. What is systematic risk? Market risk. How do we measure market risk? Okay, I'm speechless. Very good, very good. Ooh, wow, okay. Another financial side effect of acquisition is earnings growth. Even if there's absolutely no synergy of a merger, we might see an increase in earnings per share, which looks like a good thing. But we have to be careful whether this merger is really creating value or not. And I'm going to solve a question in a few minutes about it. Okay, so we talk about risk reduction. Diversification is important. You're reducing risk. By reduced risk, you can afford more debt. By reduced risk, you're basically hedging yourself against everything. So the combined firm might be less risky, which is good. Another thing, we talk about it, debt capacity and borrowing cost. After diversification, since you are less likely to go bankrupt because you're less risky, you can find more money. That's also very good. So you can lower your cost of capital. Liquidity is another thing with diversification. In general, shareholder companies, owners are very under-diversified because they're the owners of their company. They don't have lots of investments. So another company can acquire this private company, and in this case, the manager of the private company can be more diversified, having shares in this new public company. So by liquidity, by providing liquidity in the market and to this to the manager, basically you are benefiting from diversification effect as well. So that's the last thing about diversification. And earnings growth, we know that earnings growth is important. We know that earnings per share, high earnings per share is really good because it tells you how much earnings is generated per share. But a merger can be like a delusion in the earnings per share world. So if an acquiring firm has high PE ratio, and if it buys a company with low PE ratio, then overall we're going to see an increase in earnings per share, which will just be like a delusion. And I think I have an example here. Let's look at this one. Consider two companies. They both have $5 per share, so it is earnings per share. The first firm, Old World, is a mature company with few growth opportunities. It's old, there's no growth opportunities. It has 1 million shares that are currently outstanding, priced at $60 per share. The second company, New World Corporation, is a young company with much more lucrative growth opportunities. Okay, consequently, it has a higher value. Although it has the same number of shares outstanding, its stock price is 100 per share. Assume New World acquires Old World using its own stock and the takeover adds no value. That's important. We are already assuming that takeover adds no value. In a perfect market, what is the value of New World after the acquisition? What is the, how many shares must New World offer to Old World's shareholders? And what is earnings per share after the acquisition? Okay, you tell me first, what is the value of New World company? How do you calculate the value of the New World company? Yes? Thank you, exactly. So, okay, let's look at this. We have Old World and we have New World, okay? Both of them has 1 million shares outstanding. This is sold at $60, this is sold at hundreds. So the value of Old World is 60 million, right? Stock price times numbers of shares outstanding. And New World's value is 160 million. So if New World wants to buy Old World, how much money it's going to pay? 60 million, right? I mean, this is going to create no value at all. So it's going to pay the value of the, what did he say?
I would 100%.
Okay, what is goodwill? Okay, so if you pay more than the market value of the company, you enter it as the goodwill in your balance sheet. This is what you said, I think. Okay, yes, that's what I heard. Okay, so New World is going to pay 60 million to buy all Old World. Question, how much stocks it has to issue to buy 60 million dollar worth of Old World?
60 million over 100.
Thank you, exactly. So basically, it's going to issue how many shares? 600,000 shares. Okay, issue 600,000 shares. Why? Because share price is 100, and we need to have 60 million. Okay, so then what's going to happen? Oh, okay, so old world shareholders will exchange 1 million shares. They have 1 million shares for 600 shares of new world, right? So the exchange ratio will be 0.6, right? Okay, so old world has 1 million shares. New world is paying 600,000 shares. So the exchange ratio is 0.6. And in this case, we're going to have the new value of new world will be 160 million, the merged company. But this time, it's going to have 1.6 million shares outstanding. And the stock price will still be 100. Why? We are adding no value. The merger will add no value. That was what we said. If you calculate earnings per share, how much money you're creating? What is earnings per share? The old one was $5. What is the new earnings per share? I need to calculate what? The earnings changed, of course. Huh? Okay, so earnings per share was 5 for both of them. Okay, right? So earnings for both of them was what? 10 and 10. How do you calculate it? No, not 10. Not 10. Okay, earnings are 5 million for both cases. You're multiplying those with 1 million shares outstanding. So separately, they had 5 million earnings. So the combined firm's earnings will be 10 million. But now we have 1.6 million shares outstanding. So it's going to be 625. So earnings per share was 5 first, for both of them. But now, with the new company, earnings per share increased. Why this happened? Because a company with lots of growth opportunities, New World, is buying a company with low growth opportunities. So it's just a delusion. So if you calculate the PE ratios, actually you're going to see the effect. No? Are you sure? Okay. For the New World, PE ratio was 100 over 5. PE ratio is price over earnings. Okay, so which was 20. After the takeover, the new PE ratio is 100 over 625, which is 16. As you can see, there's a drop in the PE ratio, and it was because high growth company buying a low growth company. So even an increased earnings per share after the merger doesn't mean that that merger was a good thing. You have to be more careful about what the merger is all about. Okay, so we already saw that even if a merger doesn't have any economic value, earnings per share might increase. But to have a better idea about things, look at the PE ratios and how things change. Any questions? Okay, so we're going to continue Tuesday. Okay.
The smaller firm is smaller than large firm, so it affects much more than large firm.
Oh, definitely, definitely. Definitely. When you have weighted averages, of course, large companies will have more weights. So the outcomes for large mergers affect the outcomes a lot. Alican is definitely right. So we're going to talk about agency problems with mergers. One is definitely the empire building behavior. And large firm CEOs can be, let's say, more greedy in the sense that they already have lots of money. So if you have the CEO of a small company, you don't have much money. And when you look at projects, you're trying to find good projects. Big companies, they have tons of money, so they can also afford making bad investments. So in general, the evidence we see is large mergers generally destroy value, or large companies mergers are not very good compared to small companies mergers. One little thing I want you to look is actually the most of the lost value in the merger market comes in the crisis year. So for those 3 years from 1998 to 2001, look at the loss. It's okay. Let's continue with analyzing returns in the mergers. So let's look at the returns to bidders. These are the dollar gain or losses throughout time from 1980 to 2001. As you can see, till the end of 1990s, you see there is almost no value created for bidders after a merger. Then we see really bad losses after the merger for the bidders. So it is very questionable, let's say, whether a merger is a good investment for the acquired firm or not. We know that for target firm, it's always good. For the acquired company, we don't know it. So let's look at one more example here. These are the percentage and dollar returns for the merged company, both target and the acquirer, minus 134. When you look at the longer period, 1991 to 2001, it is minus 90. So, which means most of the value destruction comes from the crisis years mergers. Actually, if you take out those 3 years of in the 1990s, actually the rest of it is profitable. So you have positive value. Okay, the same thing can be said to acquiring firms part as well. Overall, you see that the reaction to the acquired companies are positive, but since big acquirers are making, or let's say spending more money on the mergers, or maybe making worse mergers, we see a dollar loss in the right-hand side of the table. Okay, so we talk about those. The last thing I'm going to show is the premiums, merger premiums. So these are merger premiums from 1973 to 1998. As you can see, in general, the premium paid, if you remember what is premium, it is basically the acquisition price on top of the pre-merger price. It is generally 40%. So we know that we already talked about why target companies, it seems like on average, mergers are creating value when you look at the price reaction. But actually the deals that have negative value are the large deals, large mergers. So big companies' mergers are generally destroying value, or at least this is what the shareholders think. So that's one interesting thing, like large firms' mergers are destroying value. So small firms are making better mergers. Why do you think it might happen? It might be the case.
Maybe there are two reasons. One is maybe huge acquisition cost between companies, because they are large companies, and maybe second reason is
that's definitely a wonderful point. Of course, large merger. May I just summarize? Okay, he is right. He basically says the cost of a large deal is really, really high. Yes?
The second reason is maybe greed of the CEO, being an empire builder. They make somehow profitable acquisitions to be just, so they greed.
Perfect. You know, your answers are biggest birthday gifts to me. Thank you. Yes? And also the acquirer, the buyer. So this is from 1980 to 2001 for 20 years. This is for 1982 to 1990. Here, 1991 to 2001 And this is 1998 to 2001. It's the crisis time. So interesting, there are a couple of interesting things here. One is here. So when you look at the percentage return to the merged company, so the market reaction, it's always positive, right? This is both of the acquire and the target company's point of view. It seems like investors always think mergers are good. If you look at the dollar gain or loss, what do we have? We have a loss of $80 billion when we look at the dollar value of the transaction. Even if shareholders think that it seems like a good deal, and this is how the market stock market reacts, we see a dollar loss after the merger. And why do you think that this happens? It's not a fair question, so I will just tell you the answer. So when we calculate percentage returns, we calculate the unweighted percentage returns. So we are giving actually equal weight to all the merger transactions. And overall,